Martha, thanks, Brett, and welcome to Hannity. This is a Fox News alert. President Trump offers a new vision for American foreign policy during a national address at Fort Myers in Virginia, where he outlined a new agenda for Afghanistan. I have my full opening monologue coming up later in the show. Also, Newt Gingrich will join us. And, of course, we'll get analysis from our military leaders. But first, it was the perfect setting at Fort Myers in Arlington, Virginia, in front of his cabinet and, of course, the troops. Now, he stood there on hallowed ground right near America's National Cemetery, where thousands of brave men and women who fought and bled and died for our country are laid to rest. Now, the speech was also delivered perfectly, the right tone, the right cadence, the right pitch. The president's position on Afghanistan is based on what he calls principled realism, and the commander-in-chief also proved tonight that he's willing to listen to the advice of the men and women on the ground, the generals on the ground that really win wars. Watch this.
My original instinct was to pull out. And historically, I like following my instincts. But all my life, I've heard that decisions are much different when you sit behind the desk in the Oval Office.
Now, President Trump also outlined that America's #1 goal right now is the safety and security of you, the American people, and not foreign nation building. Watch this.
We will no longer use American military might to construct democracies in faraway lands or try to rebuild other countries in our own image. Those days are now over. Instead, we will work with allies and partners to protect our shared interests. We are not asking others to change their way of life, but to goals that allow our children to live better and safer lives. This principled realism will guide our decisions moving forward.
Now, the president also declared the days of endless military spending and foreign conflicts are over. Take a look.
America will work with the Afghan government as long as we see determination and progress. However, our commitment is not unlimited, and our support is not a blank check.
Not a blank check. President Trump then pressured the countries in the region near Afghanistan. It's their time to step up, and they've got to pay their fair share. Take a look.
We will ask our NATO allies and global partners to support our new strategy with additional troop and funding increases in line with our own. We are confident they will. Since taking office, I have made clear that our allies and partners must contribute much more money to our collective defense, and they have done so.
And here is the commander-in-chief. He's refusing to telegraph our military plans to America's enemies. This is refreshing. Take a look.
Conditions on the ground, not arbitrary timetables, will guide our strategy from now on. America's enemies must never know our plans or believe they can wait us out. I will not say when we are going to attack, but attack we will.
Now, after outlining his new plan for Afghanistan, President Trump made a powerful call for unity in America. And, of course, he made his opening statement, obviously geared at the tragedy in Charlottesville. Take a look at this.
When one part of America hurts, we all hurt. And when one citizen suffers an injustice, we all suffer together. Loyalty to our nation demands loyalty to one another. Love for America requires love for all of its people. When we open our hearts to patriotism, there is no room for prejudice, no place for bigotry, and no tolerance for hate.
Now, we're going to have much more later on the program with Newt Gingrich tonight. Plus, tonight, we saw the president in governing mode. Now, he has faced an onslaught, as we all know, of unprecedented attacks. And if I had any advice for the president, that using the power of the pulpit to advance his agenda with a good cadence and tone and obviously a good plan that has been studied well, this is now the time for the agenda the agenda and the agenda, and tonight was a great first step. The power of that presidential pulpit is beyond description. Now, take out a few missteps that have occurred, and, of course, the unrelenting media attacks and Democratic attacks. When you really think about fixing America, the forgotten men and women, and keeping us safe and secure, you know what? There are no boundaries to the incredible things that can be done for this country and for the world. What we saw tonight is the president's better self. Now it's time to get to work, especially after Labor Day. Let's not step on this win. Joining us now is the former U.S. ambassador to the UN, Fox News contributor John Bolton. Mr. Ambassador, let's start with you, your general impressions. I like a lot of things about that. I don't like nation building. I don't like an unlimited budget. I don't like others not stepping up and doing their part. I don't like the fact that other presidents have telegraphed even pulling out, and then people just have to sit and wait, and then they know they're free to go back to the nefarious activities. Your thoughts generally?
Well, I think this is a dramatic change from the Obama administration. That's probably the most important thing, and I think that comes through clearly in a lot of respects. I think much of what the president said is exactly right. He's not going to have artificial time limits. He's not going to negotiate with the Taliban until presumably they have been sufficiently beaten back so that they negotiate on our terms. And he said to the troops that they'll have the necessary tools and the right rules of engagement. Nonetheless, I still think there are a couple of critical points here where, while the speech rhetorically was fine, we need to see how it plays out. Number one, Pakistan, which he correctly brought up as one of the changing that policy, one of the pillars of his new policy. Look, I think Afghanistan will be won or lost in Pakistan, and I certainly think that more pressure on the government there because of its support for terrorist groups, giving them safe haven in Pakistan is welcome. But let's be clear, Pakistan is a nuclear power. And to see them tip into terrorist control themselves would give us Iran or North Korea on steroids now. And there's one word missing from the president's speech that I think should have been there, and that word is China. China made both North Korea and Pakistan nuclear powers. Pakistan wouldn't have this capability without China. China has, as part of its One Belt, One Road initiative, basically increasing its influence in Pakistan dramatically. They put a lot more money into the country than we do. And I think it's time to say to China, if you want better relations with the United States, we have a lot of issues, but one of them is helping us convince Pakistan to give up the Taliban safe havens, give up ISIS and Al-Qaeda, get them out of the country, and really seriously renounce terrorism. I'd like to see more of that.
I agree with you. There is one good piece of good news as it relates to the issue of China, though, Ambassador, and that is when you really think about it, remember what China has been doing with North Korea. They launched first. They will not be there for them. Remember, they canceled the coal shipment after the president of China met with President Trump. So apparently they have a good relationship. Apparently 30-minute meetings went on for 3 hours. So there seems to be some hope there. But I want to go over some of the president's words. You know, you can't make these decisions from Washington. You're not going to telegraph what they do. These partners must contribute, and we're going to blow them away. And one of my biggest complaints, and he addressed this tonight, is Vietnam. 58,000 of America's greatest die, and we pull out because politics, you know, we begin to view war through the prism of politics. The war in Iraq and Afghanistan, they both were equally politicized. You cannot politicize war, nor do we need to be involved in nation building. But if we want to defeat radical Islam, and we see all these attacks, we better take it seriously there to prevent it from here. I think it's a good strategy.
Yeah, remember, Barack Obama said in the war on terrorism, we're not going to have something like the end of World War II with the Japanese surrender signed on the bridge of the Missouri. Of course, actually, it was signed on the main deck of the Missouri. But
and then he put handcuffs on our soldiers.
Yeah, victory is such an old-fashioned concept, and I think Trump has reversed that. I do think in his rhetoric tonight, though, maybe from his advisors, there's still the implicit argument that we're fighting in Afghanistan to defend Afghanistan. That is incidental to the reason we're there. We're there to protect America from the terrorist threat, and that's why when you say there's no blank check for Afghanistan, certainly in terms of nation building, I absolutely agree with that. But we cannot believe that our defense ultimately rests on Afghanistan, because if that's the case, we've got real trouble.
No, but it's a part of the war on terror, and he addressed that too. He talked about secure borders. He talked about a policy here at home, which we'll get into all throughout the night. Ambassador, good to see you. Thank you for being with us. Joining us now with more reaction to the president's remarks, the host of War Stories, Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North. Colonel, you have a couple of Purple Hearts from Vietnam, and I know you lost a lot of friends in Vietnam, and you know a lot of people that are buried there at Arlington. So I know this is a raw issue for you because I watch you give speeches and tear up on the issue. And you're as tough a guy as I'll ever meet in my life, and your heart breaks for these families and everybody. The biggest thing I heard tonight is obliteration, winning, taking the handcuffs off, letting the generals and the guys on the ground decide. And no longer was it going to be about nation building, and no longer are we going to have these ridiculous rules of engagement.
Well, for the very first time, we have a definition of victory, attacking the enemies and obliterating ISIS and AQ and preventing the Taliban from taking over and stopping terrorists from killing them and attacking Americans. Straightforward and good stuff, and the right thing to say, certainly in the aftermath of 8 years of the previous administration. He's going to shift from a time-based to a condition-based decision on any withdrawal. He's going to integrate the military, diplomatic, and economic instruments of power. And he put, as Ambassador Bolton just said, put Pakistan on notice. And the idea of not giving away instances of when the troops are coming, when they're going, and what we're going to do to attack, all very, very good, long overdue. And obviously, this is going to make a difference. Here's the problem. We've now had 17 generals in 16 years running the war in Afghanistan. I've been there, and you and I have been on the air more times than I care to count in my 59 embeds in both
Colonel,
theaters.
I send you a code. Every time you've been on the road in a war zone, you and I have a special code we sent back and forth, which is totally mean on my part. And we'll save it between us.
I'm going to have one of those steaks yet. Look at he talked about the rules of engagement for waging the battle. No place to hide for terrorists. That includes across the border in Pakistan. He talked beautifully about the courage and perseverance of those that I've been covering for the last 16 years in those embeds. The idea, however, of following the same course of action on the ground that 17 generals, to include General Nicholson, who's there now, have pursued, may not be the kind of thing that's going to give us the results that we would like to have. I was pleased that he did not mention and did not talk about the idea of conducting clandestine operations, as you and I have heard about from a friend of mine. Look, we've had 2,258 Americans killed in Afghanistan. We've had over 20,000 of them wounded. I've just spent some time with a number of them out in a place that's got Old Faithful in it. Good place for a Marine to visit, Semper Fidelis. Look, we've spent almost $1 trillion. We're going to spend almost $50 billion this year. And you've got to be able to say, we're going to look at some other tactics on the ground, maybe some kind of hybrid, if you would, between what was presented last weekend up at Camp David and what the president announced today, that talked only about straightforward U.S. troops on the ground and the expectations you have for our allies to step up to the plate. I think it was very positive. I think it was totally unlike anything
let me ask you this. When the president talked about going against his own instinct, based on what he learned and who he spoke to and the things that you can only know and learn as president. Some people would say, oh, that's he's changing his position. I don't see it that way at all. I think that's the reality of what we're facing. Then every one of my military friends was writing me ecstatic tonight. Those that served, especially under Obama, oh, we're not going to telegraph. We're going to take the handcuffs off. The rules of engagement are going to be on. You mean we can actually fight a war and not get accused of murdering the enemy when they're coming with an IED or some type of explosive device to kill us?
I remember the last president announcing he was going to do a troop surge. And the very next day, he went to the U.S. Military Academy at West Point and announced when they were withdrawing. This president just said it's a conditions-based withdrawal. He hasn't given a specific number of troops he's going to put in there. That's very important. It sets our adversaries on notice that they can't simply fight us and wait us out. In other words, this is not a time-driven strategy. And that's a very positive thing. I think, notwithstanding what the ambassador just said a few moments ago about Pakistan, it puts them on notice. And the rules of engagement are now changed so that they're defined not in the corridors of power in Washington, they're defined out there on the battlefield. And I hope for
Colonel,
success. Don't get me wrong, buddy.
No, listen, I know your love of the military, and I've been out on the road with you and in hospitals with you, so I know your commitment is beyond anybody I know. This, I think, is important, though. Why would any president, in the case of Obama, ever telegraph what we're going to do? He's not saying how many troops. He's not saying what he's going to do. He's just promised overwhelming use of military force, decisions made on the ground as necessary by the people that know best.
Absolutely the right thing to say. And not Obama. I'm talking about President Trump. What he said tonight is spot on. I'm just hoping that the strategy allows room for some, if you will, new ideas, like the plan for putting non-U.S. advisors who actually live with the Afghan troops on the ground, who fight under Afghan ROE. Yeah, I just,
covert operations, plausible deniability, right?
Yes, and he didn't talk about it, which I consider to be a very good thing, because I know some people were thinking, well, he ought to reject it out of hand. And some of the folks that we've had on previous shows have said reject it out of hand. He didn't. And I consider that to be a very positive thing. Look, this speech tonight needed to be given. It was the right thing to say. It pays enormous respect to the soldiers, sailors, airmen, guardsmen, and Marines that you and I have come to know and love. And it gives credence to their sacrifice and their perseverance.
There are people serving jail terms now. Clint Lawrence is one name that comes to mind. And before he became a platoon leader, Clint Lawrence was tasked with dealing with a platoon that had previously, in the prior week or two, lost people that were their brothers. Literally right before. The same method that had been used, guys on motorcycles with explosive devices, charging the troops, wouldn't listen, wouldn't stop. He has to make a second decision. Well, he's now spending time in jail, this guy, 20 years. Well, and that's the kind of guy I'd like to see get a pardon.
Well, the president has the power to do that, and that's the good thing. This is a commander-in-chief who loves those who serve in uniform. He loves those who put their lives on the line. He said that again tonight. I think his acknowledgement at the very beginning, when he says you'll learn a lot more when you're sitting in the chair where these decisions have to be made, is a remarkable. No previous president in my lifetime has said those kinds of things since Ronald Reagan.
Yeah,
and I look forward with great respect to a president who can do that.
All right, Colonel, good to see you, and safe home. And my promise continues for this appearance, even though you're not in a war zone. You're safe home, friend. Thank you.
Semper Fi, buddy.
When we come back, Michael Waltz, Tony Shaffer, Tony Tata, they all react to President Trump's Afghanistan strategy. Then, later tonight, Newt Gingrich is here. My opening monologue coming up straight ahead.
Where are we? Conditions on the ground, not arbitrary timetables, will guide our strategy from now on. America's enemies must never know our plans or believe they can wait us out. I will not say when we are going to attack, but attack we will.
That was more from President Trump earlier tonight. Joining us now on the phone, he's calling into us. The Afghanistan ambassador to the U.S., Hamdullah Mohib, is with us. Sir, I'm glad you're watching, and dying to hear your thoughts. Tell us what you thought of the president's speech tonight.
Well, Sean, we welcome President Trump's decision for a strong Afghan-U.S. partnership in the fight against terrorism with the outcome.
Ambassador, that includes Afghanistan stepping up. That includes Pakistan stepping up. This is we don't have endless patience here and money. To what extent will the region meet their own challenges, sir?
Absolutely. This is the first time a focus has been put on what Afghanistan needs to succeed, and we're grateful for this outcome. President Trump has embraced a strategy that gives Afghanistan what it is hoping for, specifically what you mentioned, an expanded authority for troops to target criminal networks and terrorists, and a break away from of silence over Pakistan's sheltering of terrorists. It's also a shift away from talking about timetables, arbitrary timetables and numbers, to letting conditions on the ground determine military strategy.
Mr. Ambassador?
Afghanistan also wants, yes.
The president was very clear. The American people must see progress. It's not going to be unlimited. This is not a blank check, as he said, and you've got to carry the share of the burden. My question to you is Afghanistan and will Pakistan bear their fair share? Because the patience of the American people is rather thin right now. Absolutely.
Afghanistan wants an honorable and enduring outcome for our own sacrifices. John, we're thankful to the sacrifices of the American people, the Americans who have come here and worked with us, fought shoulder to shoulder with us against our common enemy. But we have also made tremendous amount of sacrifices and continue to be determined to defeat terrorism on our soil, and work with our partners in the United States and our NATO allies to ensure that those states that sponsor and shelter terrorists also understand that it's in their interest to work with us to defeat terrorism.
Sir, the only thing I'll say to you, and I wish you the best here with a humble heart, that America will help you to build a better country. But this is not about nation building or changing your way of life, and it's really going to be up to you to sort out a lot of evil that exists in that country. The Taliban must be destroyed, and you're going to have to bear the burden of the bigger part of that sacrifice as it's your country, your region of the world. You understand that, correct, sir?
Afghanistan is absolutely committed to reforms in our security sector and throughout. We do understand and are working extremely hard to ensure that we take control of this war, and we have been doing so. We have a 4-year plan that will be complemented by this American strategy in order to defeat terrorism and at the hands of the Afghans. We are committed to this war and are doing everything we can to ensure
Ambassador,
we play our part in defeating our common enemy.
As you know, we believe in America that we are endowed by our Creator and all men are created equal, and we pray for your country that it gets the freedom that people can then flourish to be the people that God intended them to be. We wish you all the best under very difficult circumstances. And yes, we've got to protect our country, and we will. Thank you, sir, for calling in. Joining us now with reaction, former Green Beret, Fox News contributor.